On August 12, 1986, Ronald Reagan had a speech that included 9 words that you would think would forever have stuck in the minds of people. But it seems we've really forgotten those words just a short 33 years later. We've forgotten the history of failed policies, and we continue to see progressives move us further and further away from what our founding fathers intended. I'm your host, Jared Dyson, and I'll explain more this week on the Closet Conservative podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Closet Conservative podcast. Thank you for joining us again this week. So on August 12th, 1986, there was a statement by Ronald Reagan that I referenced in the introduction, and I want to talk about the 9 words that he stated, those words that have really stuck in my mind from my youth and throughout time and talking with other conservatives. Those 9 words were, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." Conservatives everywhere are typically familiar with that phrase, and Reagan gave it in the context that it is a scary thought. Sure, Reagan confirmed that it is a scary thought, but it seems that it has now become the Democratic motto. Their solution to everything is that the government should be the one to fix it. It's not just a broken road or something simple like that the government's looking to fix, nothing like that. I'm talking about every potential injustice, anything that could potentially happen in life that might cause pain or anguish to someone. Democrats seem to think that the government is the one to step in and fix that. Anything that may pander to a special interest group, the Democrats think, obviously it matters, we need to be the ones to set this right. They suggest that the government is best equipped to set right all the wrongs of life, all the wrongs in society, but that is simply not the case. The problem goes further back than just recent history. I mean, obviously we can track this back to current Democrats, and I could lay blame on them for hours and hours if you wanted to listen, but it goes further back. This has been a problem with Democrats for years, and I think it's worth looking at. I think you can go back and look at the former President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. It started soon after his election. You know, we were in the midst of the Great Depression, and he's come out with this massive program called the New Deal. With that New Deal, there was some massive government expansion, a lot of increased government regulations, new government programs, new departments. Even through all of those things, the Great Depression lingered. Now, that should have been the first warning sign that increased regulation and government-ran programs are a horrible idea, but instead of changing course, FDR decided to double down. He come back after that with New Deal number 2, essentially, and we got great programs like the Social Security Entitlement Program, and he continued with other ideas and government programs and entitlement programs. Now, the Social Security system is nearly bankrupt. Why? Because it was a horrible idea. What you'll find is that none of these government programs actually helped the economy. The Great Depression lingered. The only thing that was created was a bloated federal government that did not serve the interest of the people. What's interesting, though, is that these events did alter the course of U.S. history. As you look at time and time progressions, you can fast forward to 1964 and President Lyndon Johnson. I think he can also be blamed. In 1964, he signed the Food Stamp Act, which paved the way for the current food stamp program that creates dependency on the government for food resources. Now, if you know me, you know I have no problem that if someone needs help and someone needs assistance, I have no problem doing that. But there's other ways to do that outside of the government. I mean, obviously my Christian faith teaches me that I should care for the poor and the needy, and I do that. I try to do that at every chance I can. But this is outside of the government. The government is not the best source for that help. But you gotta wait. It gets a little bit better with Johnson. So in 1965, he gives us this great program called Medicare. I mean, it was sold to us as a means for healthcare insurance for retired persons 65 and older. It would run concurrent with Social Security. It was just another entitlement program that allowed people to depend on the government to provide for their well-being. You got to thank these 2 great Democrats, FDR and LBJ, for what they did for our country, giving us all these great bloated entitlement programs. But you got to look at Medicare. I mean, it's consistently struggling. The funding, the operations. I mean, it's just a horrible ran program. This is far from what the Founding Fathers really meant for our government, yet the Democrats continue to push these entitlement programs. Johnson was a great example here again. You can thank him for the HUD Act and giving free housing and all these entitlement and welfare programs that he gave us. They're just a significant drain on federal resources and funding. Obviously, there's a lot of programs that I could bring up as part of this conversation, and for the sake of time, I think I'll stop there because I think you get the picture. These programs are all over the place. The Democrats have been trying to push these since the 30s, and now these programs are coming up more and more in current day. Just think back to the Obama administration where he pushed for Obamacare and additional regulations on the healthcare industry. It was pitched as the savior to the healthcare world. It was going to do something great for the United States. It was going to change how we consumed healthcare. It was going to overturn all these great things. I mean, it was so great, that massive thousands of pages of bills, we didn't even have to read it. We needed to pass it before we read it to see what was in it. You remember those days? I mean, it was such a great thing, but it didn't do anything to solve the health crisis in our country. Government programs and regulations are not the save-all, solve-all of life's problems. Now the Democrats want you to continue to believe that the government can come in and succeed and help people. I mean, if past indications were not good enough, they want you to continue to sign on. The New Deal and all these other programs I talked about, they did not lift people out of poverty. They did not eliminate social depression and all these other things that the Democrats claim. They didn't equalize and help the middle class and the lower class and all these things. So how do you think these new programs are going to do something? I mean, obviously the Democrats would like you to think that healthcare is a right and everyone deserves it. It's just an effort by them to take over the healthcare system. It's an effort by them to continue to balloon the size of the federal government, continue to drain federal resources, but that's not enough. I mean, we've got to give away free college tuition. We need to give away more free housing. We should force private companies to pay their employees $15 an hour no matter what job they perform. It's not based on performance. It's not based on the job requirements or education or skill set or anything. No matter what, you deserve $15 an hour. It's a right that you earn that, and it's a right that you deserve that. They would have you to believe that this type of government regulation wouldn't cause any strain on the system or wouldn't cost you any more money, but that's a lie. Obviously, they can't fund Social Security. They can't fund Medicare. How do you think they're going to fund these programs? But I think there's another great example here that come to light in a recent situation involving California. It's another healthcare example, and I talked about it briefly in an article this week over on our website. The FDA is a government regulating agency that is working to protect consumers, specifically in the area of food and drugs. It actually ends up costing you more to have this agency than it would if it didn't exist. For example, government regulations have driven up consumer drug prices dramatically since the early 90s. In 1991, a pharmaceutical company needed to earn $412 million on one drug to make the development of that medication worthwhile. As of 2003, the required number of revenue was actually $1 billion. In 2016, it was over $2.5 billion. Yes, you heard me correct. $2.5 billion to justify developing one drug. Why? Well, it has to do with the higher clinical trial costs, the additional demands, the regulations, the decreased likelihood of government approval. I mean, it's really affected the cost of prescription drugs. FDA approval rates on medications went from 23% to 11.83% during that time under these new regulations. So a company will spend billions and billions of dollars on medications that are going to be denied or rejected. But the argument that the left is going to make is, well, they're safer, aren't they? But my question is, but are they? I mean, is this really actually creating a safer environment and a safer society? Well, think about this for a minute. As we continue to regulate pharmaceutical manufacturers, we are forcing the production costs to continue to go higher, which causes the drug rates to go up. I think everyone that's listening would agree. Prescription drugs are expensive, and we'd all love to do something about the cost of prescription drugs. When costs are so high, people end up becoming non-compliant with their medications, and they're sitting around, they're not addressing those chronic illnesses and diseases that they may have. So what ends up happening? Well, it obviously creates a further strain on the health system, and in turn, cost you more money. It's a vicious cycle that actually is created by government regulation. But don't worry, the government's here to help, remember? California is set to launch the latest in the Democrats' attempt at a government takeover of a program with their prescription drug program. In their drug program that they're proposing, California will go into the pharmaceutical business in an attempt to create competition to drive rates down. The plan will also force manufacturers to apply in order to sell medications in California at a set market rate. It's going to be restricted where unless you agree to sell it for this specific price, you can't do business in California. I think we all know what happens when you restrict free business. Eventually, those businesses will leave the market. While it may create some competition initially, these businesses are going to realize they can't continue to perform in those areas. The money is not going to be there, the revenue is not going to be there, and that competition is going to be gone. So then the government is in the business of running pharmacies, it's in the business of providing medications to its residents. This is not the role of the federal government as our founding fathers saw it. The founding fathers never intended government to be in the course of business. They never intended the government to be running these kind of programs. Now, a lot of people may argue and they say, well, Jared, how do you believe that the founding fathers didn't mean for government to be stepping in and taking care of these things? Well, you have to look no further than the Constitution and the few short sentences in the preamble of the Constitution. The preamble of the Constitution tells us that it was created as a means to bind us together as people, provide a means of justice, promote peace in the United States, promote a common defense, promote general welfare, and to promote liberty for ourselves and our future. In other words, it was to protect, provide peace, and ensure freedom. The Democrats have taken that line of general welfare to mean that this means that no one should ever have to work and no one should ever have to try in their lives. You should never struggle. You should never have to worry about being successful. It should just be given to you. Our country was never meant to be a country where there was no reason to work, that there was no difficulty, and that there would never be a trying time. In fact, our country was founded on trying times. It was founded on challenges. Is our country perfect? Absolutely not. I mean, we've got a lot of history and things that are not popular, a lot of things that we can say were embarrassing and we're not proud of. But there's one thing for sure. Our country is far better than any other country on the face of this earth. So while the Democrats are out here parading around promising free health care, free tuition, free housing, free food, and free anything else they can think of, we should absolutely be scared. In fact, the Democrats have pretty much made their new campaign motto, and it goes something kind of like this. We are Democrats from the government, and we're here to help. Or maybe we should rephrase that. We're the Democrats, we're here to take over. Bloating government and increasing regulations have never once helped our country. It's all throughout our history. Every time government expands, it does nothing to actually benefit our country. It only starts a vicious cycle of resource-draining dependence that allows corruption to remain in power. But that's exactly what these Democrats want. They want to remain in power. They want their corruption to remain in power, to have no challenges. Exactly how did we get to this point? We've forgotten our past. We've forgotten the things we went through as a country. We've forgotten the challenges that we faced. We've forgotten the failures of past policy. It's okay to fail. It's okay to mess up. But we have to fix it going forward. Instead, our federal government has decided that they want to put a Band-Aid on something, that they want to take a program that's a failure, and we're going to continue to push it down the road because we don't want to fix it. The reason that we're in this situation is that we have forgotten our past. It's time that we go back and we look at our history. It's time that we go back and educate ourselves and help us understand exactly where we were and exactly what we've came from.
This is the Closet Conservative Podcast. All material copyright The Closet Conservative. Music courtesy of Greg Shields Music. Remember to subscribe to our podcast to receive all the latest episodes. We can also be found online at closetconservative.net or on Facebook and Twitter.